things are breaking news-wise so fast that, honest to God, I sit down to read my email in the morning, and it just keeps reminding me of that feeling that of being a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Whoa, stuff is just happening left and right. And on top of that, I'm starting to see an awful lot of misinformation and sourcing back to Terrell, not necessarily Terrell himself, but it is sourcing back to those around him. That's creating a lot of confusion and distortion out there. We're going to talk about that tonight. And first off, just want to bring Bill on just for a second and say, hey, Bill, thanks for standing up tonight. Just for the audience to let you know, Bill has a real bad toothache, and he decided to be a real champ and stand up and work the show tonight, and he'll go to the doctor for the necessaries. And Bill, thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, man, and just afterwards, take 2 or 3 of the good stuff. And
I
then
might
out
take
there,
3 or 4. You never know what I might take.
Yeah, I mean, well, after this conversation tonight, it'll be to the extreme. Then on the virtual chat room, we have Susan from down in Mexico. And Susan, you're a sweetheart. You're always out there working and getting that chat room organized. And for those of you who are in the chat room, if you want to have your questions presented to our guest tonight, make sure Susan knows about it. And my rules with the chat room are simple. Hang your guns at the door, cowboy, and be nice to Miss Kitty, and you'll have a good time. And if not, you will leave the premises feet first. Now, with that, let me bring in our guest for the night. First off, we have our newest member of the LN team, Larry Prescott. Hey, Larry.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. You know, last time you came in, you were a caller, and Ed and Richard just liked you so much, and you had so many good ideas. They said, hey, this guy can walk and chew gum at the same time. Bring him in. And you did.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
I've been working at it. The gum falls out sometimes, but I'm getting it down.
All right. Yeah, well, none of us are perfect. Is that, by the way, sugar-free? And then I've just brought on Richard, Ned, Ed, and Rich. Hey, guys.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Ed.
All right.
Hey, Ed.
All right. And before we get into the show tonight, fellas, does anybody have real fast a hot button issue that they want to discuss?
Not me.
The only thing that I would like
to cover it all.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Rich.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I don't have anything as far as a hot topic right now. I think we're going to cover a lot tonight, and whatever hot topic I might, there's too many of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just like I said, it's like being a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, you know.
That's it.
You got to be quick on your feet. Ed, anything for you?
I just wanted to mention to everybody that unlike some sources, we just put the information out here, and it's up to the people to take it and run with it. We don't come right out and make anything that isn't verified and proven to be true, no statements. So if we say something that's credible, and but just take it for what it is. It's information. We're sort of like throwing the news out, and you decipher it.
Well,
there
there is
is
some conjecture in there. I got to say that, at least on my part. Conjecture is part of discovering a problem.
Well, you know, we all are having a great conversation. I've really been enjoying the preparation leading up to the show, and good Lord, we've done a bunch of it. And I just hope we can get through all the things tonight. But I want to say one thing to the audience and everyone up front. And, you know, what I would love to be able to do for 2 hours is just to talk about preparation and planning. But I don't do that. At least I'm not on this show. And the reason why is, over the years, what I have found is that if people can get good, objective information that's honest, then they'll sort things out for themselves. And once they take responsibility for that knowledge, they decide to take action on it, They're just like little Energizer bunnies. Bang, 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 right down the road. You don't have to wind them up, whatever. Just get them enough information, it flips the switch, and they're off and down the road. And they'll do the preparation and planning that's necessary. And so I guess what I'm saying to you listeners out there is that we've got a reverse logic thing going here. If we can give you the basic information you need and get it to you as honestly and as fairly as we can so that you can make a decision about it, once you take responsibility for that, you'll know what to do next. And with that, let's get into the first topic we have. Item number 1 on the list is the latest about LNN, and of course my email box has been absolutely stuffed with folks talking about the JPL simulator has changed the graphic for the trajectory of Planet X. So I'll tell you what, I'll throw that at Richard first.
Yes. In the past, when we looked at the orbital simulator page, they'd have sharp angles to designate the direction that LNN was going. I think that was just showing their uncertainty. And now that they've locked in on where they think it's going to go, they've just gone ahead and rounded out the graph. As far as the orbital parameters themselves, they have not changed. We'll still have, the alignments coming up when they're supposed to. Closest distance to the sun is going to be the same date. So nothing's changed except the graphic.
Okay. Well, and also we've been talking a lot in our email preparations for the show about the velocity of LNN, and let me throw that one at Ed to start that off.
Oh, that's interesting because we have several different ways that we figure it, and the good part is we disagree, and
no.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we would actually disagree, but there's no set method for what we use to figure it out. I know Richard likes to use the closing velocity of LNN as it's closing on Earth and then adding the Earth velocity into it. Myself, I like to use the closing velocity of LNN and the Sun and then fudge it a little bit because it's slightly off angle. And however many other methods we have, and sometimes we actually come up with the same numbers, which is tricky, but we do.
Okay. Well, Ed, I'm going to round robin on this, but first off, let me ask Ed, since we are not in unanimous agreement here, what are the numbers you have?
Well, right now, they've been showing about a 0.018 AU gap closing speed every day for the Sun. And that's off a little bit of an angle, so I fudge it in. I might put in another 0.001 or something like that. Anyway, I come out around 67 to 70,000 miles per hour.
Okay. All right. And let's go next. Larry, have you got a number?
I was looking at some data that it looked a little bit faster. It looked about maybe 80. That, I think we're all about in the same ballpark here.
Okay. Richard, what about you?
Well, I went back a long way. I went back to 2007 and earlier. Actually, I went back further than that and went in 6-year gaps and figured out how fast it was going back then. It started out something like 23,000. Closer it gets, faster it's going. And I finally ended up for today somewhere around 60,000 miles per hour. And it should pick up some more speed.
Okay. Well, I know that we have satellite observations on it, and I think we pretty much, unless anyone else has anything to add, with the exception of velocity on LNN in terms of a current update. Ed, you got anything else?
I have so many notes. Like you say, we've been digging into this so much. The one thing I might bring up is some calculations of what happens when the Earth gets to it after it crosses our orbit. And some latest calculations, there's going to be a lot of different numbers here, but I'll put it this way. 1 degree from the ecliptic at the distance of Earth's orbit works out to about, which page do I have that one on? About 1.6 million miles. So if it's 1 degree above the ecliptic at that time, it'll be over 1.5 million miles away. If it's 2 degrees, we're talking over 3 million miles, which means if there's a real good possibility, I don't care how big the tail is, they're saying the coma is 80,000 miles wide, whatever. That's not going to even come close to touching us. We might get lucky.
Okay. Okay. So as we get closer to this, I guess what? Is it starting to look more like it's just going to be another comet and nothing real special about it?
Well, we better hope so. It does look like it's going to be above us when we finally get to where it has crossed our path.
Okay. And, you know, do we have, Richard, are you seeing a possibility we fly through the tail?
Well, if we go by the information that we have from scientific web pages like JPL, it does look like it'll be above the ecliptic, a little bit too much for that to happen. But the thing about Elenin is it's a new comet, and new comets coming from the Oort cloud are known. They're kind of notorious for breaking up. Now, of course, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's possible, you know, if Elenin broke up and they dispersed somewhat, then, you know, who knows? We might fly through something like that. I do want to mention this about the speed, is that between now and the time that it comes closest to the sun, it's about a month, almost a month and a half's time, it's almost going to cover 1 AU. I'd say 0.8 AU in 1 month's time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's moving pretty quick as time goes on. It's picking up speed as we talk, you know. And as far as flying through the tail, we just have to wait and see. And as far as pictures of Elenin, we don't have any recent pictures. The reason being that it's getting a little bit too close to the sun, and a telescope, when it tries to see it at night, it's getting light pollution in pictures, and they're just not able to take a good picture. Our next best shot is Stereo B, which we'll cover later.
And as I understand, they're also going to try and cover it with SOHO when they're doing the maneuvering exercises now.
Correct.
You know, so there'll be two birds looking at it. But the big question, and it really goes to the title of the show tonight, is are we going to see that? Are they going to share that? Or is it going to be another situation, as we have seen in the past and documented on Yowza.com, where NASA takes a few weeks to decide to release images, and when they do release it, I mean, you know, it's just a handful of things. So you can tell that this has been pretty well groomed through, and everybody was just making, you know, as much effort as possible to see to it that it came beyond the news cycle with as little as possible. So here we have Stereo B, and for those of you out there, listeners, Stereo A and Stereo B are a pair of solar space-based observatories. And this, again, was something we noted back on Yowza, I think it was 2008. For the longest time, there was just SOHO, and that was it. Now, in the last few years, there has been a veritable fleet, I think 7 or 8, maybe more, solar observatories, and those are the ones that they're talking about. I would venture to say there's some black op launches too that they're doing, but you know, no doubt about that. I mean, especially with the solar maximum coming on and the concerns of that, if you know we catch a dead on X or Y class flare, and that thing's got a southern orientation on it, and the grids have not been shut down in advance of that, and we're going to have a pretty nasty time. We're going to lose our power, and electronics are going to get hammered. It'll be pretty rough. So I hope that they're going to track all that stuff. But, you know, when I look at this in terms of the comet itself, and you know, right now I am just seeing an awful lot of stuff coming on, and it's sourcing back to Terrell. And I really, gosh, I just hate taking people dead on and finding fault with what's going on. But what I am seeing right now is a lot of misinformation. And I can see where there are folks that are, well, they're just invested in their outcome, what they expect to see. You know, as Ed pointed out earlier, we're just telling you what we're finding, and we're trying to give it to you straight across the board without agendas, without manipulating it, because in the final analysis, folks, the only truth that matters is the truth that resonates within you. And the only way that happens is if you, and you alone, put it there. And that is the mission to which we subscribe, that It is to just give you that information so you can do that on your own. But a lot of the stuff I'm seeing right now is really concerning me. I think that, Larry, you had talked about there was one of the big predictions that Terrell had made. It did not come to pass. What was that?
Yeah, he was talking about how the government was using HARP technology to load up water in the Midwest U.S. And as we all know, you know, there's been a lot of flooding along the Missouri. We know about the Fort Calhoun disaster, and there's a number of levees there that were near their breaking point. And Terrell, in one of his videos, said that on July 7th, which was coincidentally a date of large planetary alignment with LNN that did not include Earth, he said that there would be some activities on the Earth at that time, and natural disasters would occur. So if the government of all people would blow the dams, then it would appear just to be another natural calamity. And he predicted on July 7th the government was going to blow up the dams. The agenda was to create additional flooding and disaster there, and went so far as to say they would declare martial law, and the purpose of that was to disrupt travel to people in general throughout the United States, but additionally to people that were trying to make it to his Ozark facility, and suggested that they may want a shortened timeline for the bug out. Well, bottom line is none of that happened on July 7th. No dams, no levees were blown, no martial law was declared, and people went about traveling, albeit a little bit inconvenienced by the flooding, but as normal.
Well, you know, I see that, and I think when you get invested in an outcome, it's really tempting. I'm not saying Terrell's out there and he intends to do things that are unkind to people, but you can lose perspective, and you can get invested into an agenda or an outcome. And when you do that, then that's the tail that wags the dog, and you start cobbling things together, and you overreach all too often, especially when you start talking what the government's going to do. Absolutely, jump in.
Speaking for myself, I don't see a problem with conjecture or trying to put together a theory of what's going on. We see things happening in our solar system and on Earth and with our sun. And, you know, we don't have, you know, maybe the education that some people do, but we are still trying to put together what's causing it. You know, we're not stupid. We can put two and two together. And I think with Terrell's case and some of the people that he was hanging with, they went the extra mile and said, this is it. You know, we're not going to do that. We're going to say this might be it. And I want to make that distinction, you know. We might say it could be something. It might be something. That's all we're saying. I'm not going to tell anybody to go live in a cave. You know what I'm trying to say? We're just I'm conjecturing sometimes. I'll come out and say it.
Well, yeah, I think what Richard's trying to say is Terrell was crying wolf.
Well, he came to a conclusion, which, you know, we're not doing that. We're saying it might be this. Things point to this or point to that. There's a difference.
Well, he had terrific research, and he had terrific information. The only problem is he made his own theories from it, and then expressed them as absolute fact. This is going to happen, and that's where I think he got lost. He wanted to make the prediction of what was going to happen from the info he had, instead of just presenting the info.
Yeah, and then let people decide for themselves. But you know,
right.
once you take a hard stand, it's really, really tough. And yeah, there's a frustration. I mean, it's on one hand, if you take a hard stand, you're going, well, then people are going to equivocate, they're going to hesitate, they're not going to, you know, take action and do what they need to do. And I will say, I mean, I have seen where when someone calls a crisis point and they put a date on it, it does get people to, I mean, it gets people off the dime, and they start rock and rolling. Guys, I lived through all this back in 2003 with Mark Hazelwood in his book Blindsided. Now, for those of you who are new to the topic, back in 2003, Nancy Leader of the Zeta Talk website was predicting that we would have a Planet X flyby in July of 2003, thereabouts. And what happened was Hazelwood, who was in her groups, went and actually pirated a lot of her material. She actually had a lawyer write a cease and desist letter, and then she was facing the cost of litigating, which she didn't even begin to have that money, and so she just had to lump it. And Hazelwood literally just lifted off a lot of her content, repackaged it in Blindsided, admitted to the public he didn't do any research on his own, so he was parroting. And but he sure was very effective at drumming up a lot of fear. And at Yowza, our site traffic was huge, but what I remember about that period was the letters that we were getting, and they were heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. I mean, people are writing, and it's like, do I go? Where do I go? What do I do? I'm scared, you know, I'm terrified, but they were struggling to write letters to, you know, sound as though they were, you know, taking a reasonable approach and then, you know, having a concern and being polite. But, man, between the lines, oh, the fear just oozed out everywhere. And some of the letters, they just flat were fearful. And some of these were so devastating for us to read. It was just hard for us. I just hated checking mail because I was seeing all these people just going through all this unnecessary fright. You know, to me it was
overreaction.
You know, overreaction. Now, I mean, could there have been a flyby in 2003? Well, I didn't think so, because, you know, the one thing, you're going to have a brown dwarf, a large object, a planet-sized object coming through the core of the system. Trust me. Now, the sun is going to be interacting with it. We're going to know it in a big way, a big, big way. We're going to see some horrendous solar activity. We weren't seeing that. Nothing was really happening. All right? It was pretty much business as usual with the sun. And sure enough, after July 2003, it was a non-event. And then what happened was just as bad. It flattened interest altogether in Planet X. It was unbelievable. In August of that year, we published an article, Is It Time to Revisit Planet X? I think 4 people read it. And it just, the whole topic died. And I remember the period of actually 2003 through most of 2004 was actually a pretty good time for us at Yowza, because with all that quiet going on, we were able to really do some very heavy, solid research. That was a good time for us research-wise. And then once there was the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami in December 2004 that killed 250,000 people, that was when interest in the topic resumed. My concern now is that I see this same cycle, all right, and I see what's going to happen with what many would perceive as a non-event. I'll say, okay, so Elenin is not Planet X, it's not a brown dwarf, and it's not the end of life as we know it, so you guys in the Ozarks can go home now. And then, boom, it flatlines the topic. Well, when it did it in 2003, it was unfortunate. If it does it now, it flatlines the topic again. It really throws a lot of people off. That's going to do some serious damage, because we don't have that window of time. You know, I mean, it is compressing. And everything, all of the patterns, everything that we've been seeing through the years and predicting that we would see these kind of things happening, they're happening. All right.
Well, Marshall, that brings up the question of what's different now than it was in 2003. Is Elenin different from anything they've ever seen before? What's different about it?
Well, what's different about 2003 as opposed to now, in 2003 we were looking at we were still in a relative period of quiescence. And, you know, there were some things that were happening. But I look at the frequency of major events and the scope of the events. Like right now, one of the things that we'll be talking about later on is the earthquake swarms that are happening on the seabed off the coast of Puerto Rico. I mean, this has got the hair up on the back of my neck, all right? We really weren't seeing those kind of things back in 2003. You know, just read a newspaper today. What's different? We've got a swath of the states in the U.S., you know, that are under brutal heat. Minneapolis with 107. Minneapolis, you know, isn't that Great White North place? I mean, you know, they're supposed to be cold up there. bizarre weather. So, I mean, I look at everything that's happening with the earth changes now and how fast they're coming. And all I got to do is just look at my emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, the stuff is really, really slamming at us. And, you know, that's, it is a new ballpark today. You know, I'll tell you, my wife in the house, she's always betting that it's not going to happen, and I just have to be concerned that it will. You know, and she was going, well, what are we going to do if nothing happens in 2012?
Right.
And I just said, well, first I'm going to get drunk and celebrate. I'm going to hang one on, man. I'll buy a case of Maker's Mark and go, you know, order in some Havana cigars from Canada, and I'm going to party on. That's what I'm going to do, and then go on and do something else. There's always something to do. But right now, it's just, it's hard for me because I see all the things that are happening. And, I mean, in 2003, think about this, guys. If I'd have told you that we'd have seen a tsunami and that we would have the world's largest nuclear power plant go into meltdown, and we would be looking at the possibility that one of the containment, the spent fuel containment pools, if there's another major incident, I mean, you know, in Japan right now, they had that typhoon, and it was way, way, way south of Fukushima, but they were still preparing that plant. And, you know, and they're putting shielding over it. They're doing whatever they're doing in response, last-minute response to it. But you just know, you know, a good typhoon hits that plant, it'll tear through that and whatever else. And then God only knows where it goes from there. So, I mean, let's take a straw count, all right? Larry, in 2003, if I had told you that the world's largest nuclear power plant would have toasted, what would you have said?
Uh-oh. Who's there?
Well, I would consider it a possibility.
Okay. You would consider
I mean,
it
I wouldn't have taken it to heart, but I would think there's an inherent danger.
That's right. And you know what? In 2003, that would have been the right thing to think about. The times have changed, haven't they, Larry?
Yes.
All right. Ed, let me ask you the same question.
Well, especially if you would have told me it was going to happen in Japan, where the people are so efficient. I would say I sincerely doubt it would happen, and just to be honest.
Yeah. And, you know, it's...
Well, Marshall, if I could add, when I was a kid, I grew up next to 3 Mile Island. So you're talking to the wrong guy on nuclear accidents. I actually lived through that. I saw the devastation. I saw how it was deliberately played down by both the federal and the state of Pennsylvania. I saw how the state of Pennsylvania passed a law so people couldn't sue Con Ed. My mother was one of the first to sue and won. So, you know, I see nuclear problems as extremely real, whatever the cause, whether nature-induced or man.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, guys, if you had told me in 2003 that the Japanese would have had this accident and their management of it would have been kind of like watching an episode of The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, I just couldn't. I don't know that I would have been able to just give that any serious thought. I mean, I, too, would have said, what do you mean? The Japanese, look at that. I mean, they just, you know, kicked Detroit out of the car business darn near, you know, and this is a very efficient country, and, boom, they're out there knocking them dead. Hey, what do you know? What we see now is sick, and it's sad. Incompetence and greed creating a situation that's even worse. And so it's the unforeseen circumstances that we don't expect, and I'm seeing more of that. That is, I think, what troubles me most, guys. It's the unforeseen tipping points, like Fukushima. It's the stuff that we just didn't imagine before, and now it pops, and it goes, and it really, really nails us. You know, so we always have to be willing to just walk away from our notions if they don't work anymore. You got to be willing to do that. You know, that's one thing I have to say with mainstream science. Man, talk about folks that have golden cows. They really do not like having to revisit something once they figured they'd decided it. And you always got to revisit. You always got to question your work. You always got to say, am I on the right thing? But with that, let's move on to item 3 so we can get through our list. And this is comet
Marshall,
homes.
if I could just interject along your point there about science's sacred cows and what they hold on to. It's a subject we're going to get. It's a little bit farther down in the list on the new particles on the sun, and now they're finding out how this is affecting carbon dating. Do you realize how that's been the holy grail for so long when determining how old an object is, and now that's coming into question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
it's changing everything.
Yeah, it's changing a lot of things, and we're not as clever as we thought we were, eh?
Well, the thing that makes you wonder, did they just discover it, or did it just start happening?
Ah, good point, Ed.
Well, that's where my conjecture comes in, Marshall.
That's it. Okay, your nickname is now Mr. Conjecture.
Well, you know, that's how you get to theories. Okay,
yeah,
well,
that's how you do.
You know, the sun, when in the nuclear reactor of the sun, let's say you're at the center of the sun, and there's a nuclear reaction that takes place. When it takes place, it forms a particle. But that particle takes millions of years to get to the surface of the sun just to get to us here on Earth. Okay, so if it takes millions of years for a particle to get to the top of the sun, and now they have a new particle being emitted, was it generated millions of years ago, or is something out there making it happen on the surface? You know what I'm saying?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
So if you got a new particle being exhibited, then it's one of two things. It came from the inside of the sun millions of years ago, or it's being generated or produced by something else out there. Period.
Yeah, and you know what? There was a flip side to that really took me back on my heels. Remember when the movie 2012 came out?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody saw 2012?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. And I remember seeing it the first time and wanting to throw up because it was so awful for science. But I walked out of that and my wife said, yeah, it was entertaining. I said, can I get my money back on the ticket? But I did go back, and I watched it a second time and a third time, and actually Emmerich does a beautiful job in that movie of actually explaining to you the mentality of the elites and how they operate. And so that is extremely useful information. So now I really do suggest to people to watch 2012. You know, forget the eye candy. Watch it a second or third time and start focusing on the motivations, what people are doing, why they're doing it. But at the beginning of that movie, all right, they started off on the premise that there was a new form of neutrino, right?
Right.
Okay. And, you know, I remember when that came out, and I'm talking to other researchers, and we're going, a new kind of neutrino that could heat up the Earth? Say what? But then we have this come around, and this is a new beast. So
it just brings up the question of what's causing it.
Yeah,
they don't even know yet. PhDs don't know yet.
You know, but the question is, I mean, it leaves a question in my mind when they were putting together 2012, and that movie was chopped before it went to market. It was actually scheduled to go out as a summer blockbuster, and they put it out in November with the art films, you know, dead season, and give it as bad a ride as they could. And you could tell in the beginning of it, the first few minutes of the film, where they start with a view in space, and you see an object that's not one of our known planets, and then, boom, that disappears, and next thing you know, you're looking at a new kind of neutrino, and they have a timeline that kind of skitters along like things have been chopped out of it. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Put across an incomplete message.
Yeah, it did. But, you know, the other thing, now it raises a question in my mind. When did they know and what did they know? What do you think?
Yeah,
we're seeing too many coincidences.
Yeah. And that's the problem. There's always these coincidences and plausible deniability. And yet, you know, yes, boom.
Well, who are the elites? Are these movie directors that have hundreds of millions of dollars? Are they considered elite? Do they have knowledge of what's going on?
I think they're just movie makers. I think they have their thumb on the pulse of the public, and they know what people are interested in, and that'll get them to the box office to watch a movie.
Well, look at the movies we've seen that are sort of like leading the way, like The Day After Tomorrow, 2012.
Or Armageddon.
Armageddon. The Comet and all that, or
in fact, if you remember
Asteroid.
that movie, do you remember that started with the space shuttle Atlantis being hit by meteors? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that takes me back to Atlantis being hit, and that happening to Atlantis. And I remember, I think it was back in 2004, 2005, the Kill Shot, the video that came out predicting that. And it looks like that's going to be a non-event unless there's another shuttle that goes up for some reason. But, you know, on one hand, it could be coincidence. On another, it's just a kind of a sense of where things are going to go. But I don't know that the Hollywood elite that they're the kind that like to play ball. It's for us to kind of wonder about that. But on the other hand, I can tell you, you know, in 2007 we brought out Planet X Forecast and 2012 Survival Guide. A Japanese publisher licensed it from us. It's published in Japan now. And they were expecting huge sales, much larger than what you'd have with other books. And they were tied in with Sony, and I think that they had inside knowledge that Sony's movie 2012 was going to have a Planet X scenario, which is Sony was talking about that in their marketing. But that all of a sudden there was this delay taking it out of the summer season where it should have gone into an art season in November, where it's the worst possible place to stick it, and the film has been chopped up on the front end. So I think, you know, it just really comes down to a telephone rings and somebody is told where the cow chews the cud, and that's how this happens.
It's also interesting to see the people that are writing these movies are, you know, they're using their own creativity. You know, it gives you a little bit of pause. You know, where are they getting these thoughts from? You know, what's making them think this? Is this like conjecture? What? I mean, it just seems awfully odd.
It does. It does. It seems really odd, and
I mean, especially the timing of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
it seems like piece by piece we're being given the whole story.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all heard that, and we're not trying to promote, you know, that agenda here, but again, it's just an observation.
Yeah, and then, you know, that we're getting it piece by piece. You know, think about what we're seeing now on the big screen and on television. You have on TV, you have that new series, Falling Skies, right, about ETs coming down and taking over the planet and enslaving us.
First, you had the event.
Yeah, how about that? Remember the ending of that?
Yeah,
that was the ending too. I mean, we don't get to see any more after now.
that was pretty wild, though.
I was just finally starting to like that show.
Yeah, and everything now is, I mean, the movies that are coming out, and I've been watching a lot of them now. Matter of fact, I even went and saw. You guys were talking about it in the last time we were on. Remember, we were talking about that movie, the new Transformer movie. And that made me curious. I went to go see the Transformer, and of course at a Twilight show. And I just $15 theater tickets just stick on my craw. But you know, it's the same thing. They're coming down to enslave us, steal the resources. You know, it's all of them are very dark. It seems that the consistent pattern is that we're on the verge of being invaded by hostile alien races that want to enslave us and suck up the resources of the planet. You know?
It's a recurring
prophecy also leads us to the same conclusion.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess on that prophetic note, let's move to item number 3 on our list.
So you're skipping number 2 for now?
The satellite observations in August and September? Oh, thank you. Oh, shame on me for missing that. Okay.
That's a quickie.
Well, since you brought it up, take the ball and run with it.
Well, it looks like sometime around the end of July 31st, they're going to start testing or maybe even actually turn Stereo B. They're going to fire the retro rockets or whatever they got to do to turn it, and they're going to try to get a picture of Comet Eleanor. So, you know, it kind of makes you wonder, you know, they're going to be risking, there's a risk for that maneuver. They might lose the satellite. They've even come out and said it on JPL. You have to look for that information, but it's there. There's a possibility that they could lose the satellite when they make that turn. They're supposed to do it 2 hours a day. And they say they're going to start July 31st, and we'll probably get actual pictures, I'm guessing about August 5th. So we may actually have a picture in the next 2.5 weeks or so.
Yeah, we might, but
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. You know, I mean, the one thing that to me is this, and it dovetails into the Comet Holmes and in 3, because during the Comet Holmes flyby, it was very interesting. It was coming through. Holmes was, you know, just an ordinary comet, and then all of a sudden it just lit up. Boom, became the brightest object in the night sky. And, you know, and as was mentioned earlier in the show, I mean, this is a relatively young comet, and they have a tendency to do things like that. So I think, you know, we need to, I think we really need to take a look at the Kachina Blue Star prophecy, and because one of the things that I think, Larry, you found it, it's you know, been parroted and reported across the internet time and time again that the Hopi elders or someone just said Holmes was in fact the designated Blue Star Kachina event. All right. Well, Larry, what did you find?
Well, first of all, let me explain exactly what this Blue Star prophecy is per the Hopi. It says, when the Blue Star Kachina makes its appearance in the heavens, the fifth world will emerge. The blue star is seen as the starting herald of a great purification period beginning prior to 2012. The time of purification is when we're supposed to focus on purifying ourselves of negativity. This is done before the start of a new era. It's predicted to be 7 years of earth changes, severe weather, earthquakes, volcanoes, wars, and flood. The Hopi prophecy also speaks of a red star that will follow later. This is seen as a more malignant and harbinger of far more radical and intense, unpleasant changes. And I forget when you guys in the panel pointed this out to me. I think it might have been you, Marshall, that there's been no real confirmation from the Hopi elders on this. It's actually been confirmation from the Mayan elders that stated in an interview with Duravo, you can't pronounce the last name, that the Council of Mayan Elders have stated their acceptance of Holmes as the Hopi Blue Star. All right, well, okay, what's up with this comet Holmes? Well, between October 23rd and 24th, 2007, comet 17P/Holmes literally exploded from a magnitude of 17 to a magnitude of 2.8, and as you know, the lower magnitude, the brighter the star. So in other words, it increased in brightness by a factor of nearly 1 million in just a few hours. Sky and Telescope magazine called it the weirdest new object to appear in the sky in memory. Images of the object show it continued to expand outward and that it became the largest object in our solar system, larger even than the sun. The pictures beamed back to Earth show an enormous object with a bluish tinge, a blue object the size of a star. And for those of you that visit Planet X Town Hall, I have actually posted an image from the Hubble when this occurred. It clearly is very large. It clearly is bright blue. And I forget which one it was. Ed or Richard, you saw this, I think?
Yes.
Say it again. Excuse me.
Yeah, and
did
so
you
anyway,
see it, Richard?
you know, a lot of people might think that, and you say, okay, now why would they think that? Well, because they say that in one of the last prophecies, and you know they've had 9, and they talk about this blue star appearing from the heavens. But an important note here, and Marshall pointed this out because we want to stick to the facts. They say will appear as a bright blue star in the heaven, this harbinger, this reminder to purify our souls and basically become more spiritually pure. But they spoke of it in terms of not only a blue star, but they also used the words a dwelling place above the earth. And Marshall pointed out to me, I mean that could even be the International Space Station. Earlier in my research, I found even some people were thinking of it as Skylab. So, I mean, you know, and we want to keep it in perspective. But if you want to take a look at it, you can see it on Planet X Town Hall. And I have a picture of it there. And I also list the 9 prophecies. The 9th says, "You will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens, above the earth, that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. And very soon after this, the ceremonies of the Hopi people will cease." And they go on to talk about what the spiritual purification is. And interestingly enough, its main point is survival from the red star that will follow. And it's an interesting note to see that they see survival to occur only from spiritual preparedness. They say it's only materialistic people who seek to make shelters. Those who have peace in their hearts already are in the great shelter of life. There is no shelter from evil. And, basically they go on. But they also say that those who take no part in making of the world division by ideology are ready to resume life in another world. Almost implying like reincarnation somewhere else. Maybe in another show we can talk about, other similar things we've read regarding this. And then
I might like to add something on that.
Go ahead.
If I might interject,
by the way,
they give us a dual meaning for Kachina.
What's that?
There's a dual meaning for Kachina, and that's what I find a little mysterious. Is they call that star the blue Kachina and the red Kachina, but their Kachinas are actually their gods or tribal leaders. And the way some of the prophecy also goes is that when the one Kachina takes his mask off, actually they say his mask must be blue or something because they call him the blue Kachina. And when he takes his mask off, then the tribal ceremonies will cease to exist. And it's like a dual happening. It's going to happen in the sky, and then it's going to happen on the planet.
Exactly, and that's a real good point. And if I follow up on that in terms of what happens on the planet, by the way, I might interject here. They also say that their homeland is supposedly going to be an area that is spared from the destruction of the Red Star. I live out here in Arizona, and I'm familiar with the tribes out here. We have them all over. But the Hopi tribe is primarily in northeastern Arizona, to some extent in the Four Corners area, but primarily northeastern Arizona and like northern mid-central Arizona. But the prophecy goes on to say that my people await Pahana, the lost white brother from the stars, as do all our brothers in the land. He will not be like white men we know now, who are cruel and greedy. We were told of their coming long ago, but we still await Pahana. He will bring with him the symbols and the missing piece of the sacred tablet, now kept by the elders, given to him when he left, that shall identify him as our true white brother. The war will be a spiritual conflict with material matters. Material matters will be destroyed by spiritual beings who will remain to create one world and one nation under one power, that of the creators. So when they're almost referencing, when they say something's returning, it's really, and then they're talking about the earth, and they're naming a person. So I mean, it kind of goes down the rabbit hole on this one, in that they're not only talking about something in the heavens, they're talking about how that is going to manifest on earth as well, both in destruction and these spiritual beings that are going to help them in the aftermath.
Well, there was one other thing that I read in that prophecy that sort of stuck out at me, and I read it all, and it said they also will see the Earth regain its proper rotation by reversing itself.
I read that. That is interesting. Another reference. According to Hopi belief, the survivors of the Great Deluge thousands of years ago split up into 4 groups that moved north, south, east, and west. Only one group completed their journey to the North Pole and back, under guidance of a brilliant star in which Great Spirit Masao traveled. When he landed, he drew a petroglyph on the second mesa, showing a maiden with a traditional butterfly hair arrangement riding in a wingless dome-shaped craft. The petroglyph signified the coming day of purification, when true Hopi will fly to other planets in ships without wings.
I found that real interesting.
Yeah. And I have to tell you guys, I mean, the more I look at the Hopi prophecy, and I'll tell you, everybody, I mean, when I first got interested in this, I was just straight geek. So when somebody started talking about prophecy, oh, come on. let's just look at the science. But over the years, the Hopi prophecies really have been strong. We got a question in. Sue threw me a question from Lori Corbett on the virtual chat room, and she wanted to know that, in 2007 when Comet Holmes came through, was there the kind of earthquake activity we're having today? I don't recall it. Do you?
Not me.
No.
Holmes was not anywhere near like Elenin is. Elenin, as a lot of people know, is right along the ecliptic, and Holmes was way above that.
Yeah.
Yes, and also, if I recall from Omersbach, if I pronounce his name, his paper, he talked about that Elenin, if it's to be believed, even despite its small size, has the impact that it does because of how it's coming in a 3-day alignment period, and I'm sure Holmes never had that.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Well, one thing that's real interesting is we've never turned a satellite before to look at something especially.
Well, they're going out on a limb doing that, and it kind of makes me curious as to why they would risk a satellite to take a picture of it. They've got all the pictures they want from Hubble or whatever assets they have. We don't see them. They've got to have close-up pictures of Comet Elenin. They've got to. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Now, the only reason I can think of why they might take a sun observatory in space and turn it towards a comet is to see what kind of particles it might be emitting, because, that particular satellite probably has all kinds of instruments on board that can tell them what kind of elements might be produced from Elenin, if you get my drift.
Well, there's something about it that they want to see.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's instruments on board that asset that could tell them, more than what they know now.
Yeah, and I'll just wrap up with this, guys, and the questions that I have either for you or for our listeners out there. Do you believe that Comet Holmes was the blue Kachina? Where have you seen references to a spiritual awakening in light of surviving an oncoming celestial-induced disaster? I know I have. It could be another whole topic of discussion. Does this purification relate to consciousness or frequency raising? Could such individuals who accomplish this be identified by a god or other entities from the heaven? Who might Pahana be, and what could be the red star?
Well, that would tempt me to ask you a question, Larry. Do the Hopi believe that was the blue Kachina? Did they quit their ceremonies, so to speak, concerning that? Because it's already come.
As far as I know, no. That the only group that said that it was the Mayans, and I could find nothing where the Hopis came out and said yes. Holmes was it. And from what I know, they still perform their ceremonies. I know I actually see them at different events out and about Arizona. They perform at different events. So I don't think they've stopped their ceremonies, and that's a good point.
No, they haven't. And from what I understand, the ceremonies pertaining to this, they don't let anybody around them when they perform those ceremonies. They keep those secret.
Well, I guess it's a question of what ceremonies, because some of them they actually, do perform for an entertainment value. I'm sure that's not the more sacred ones that probably being referred to here.
Right.
But even if they didn't say, okay, that was it, does that mean it wasn't it?
Well, you asked me a question a while ago if I actually saw Comet Holmes. Yes, I did. I saw it in the night sky many times during the night with the naked eye. And, of course, it was pale. But it looked blue to me. So, if anything was going to be a blue star, that would be it to me. Because
even if it was an International Space Station, because that's the thing that sticks in my mind because of the dwelling place reference. If that came down, wouldn't that be more fiery than blue?
Well, no, I'm talking about Comet Holmes that I saw that was blue. But, yeah, if the space station came down.
Can I jump in on that one, guys?
Yeah.
I remember when Skylab came down. I think that was back in '79.
Yeah,
it used to be the big joke. You wanted to distract somebody, you'd point up at the sky and you go, "Look, Skylab!" Everyone would turn. It's falling on us. And when Skylab came down, it was lit up and it was blue, and it was falling in. And I remember at that time, that was the very first time I heard about the Hopi prophecy. And, you know, and I wasn't even interested in the topic at that time, but it was just something I picked up on a news report that they were saying, well, this was prophesied by the Hopi. So, you know, Comet Holmes is not the blue star. Skylab is not the blue star, because in my mind, the dances still continue. But more importantly is the way I read that Blue Kachina prophecy is when we see that, we know the guacamole's hitting the fan. It's a time of redemption, and people are going to be scared. And that has certainly not happened. And that brings us to a little bit above the top of the hour, and I'm going to give the listeners just a little time to go out and get the tea kettle going and throw the cat out for the night. And for our music interlude tonight, we're going to do something that this was a composite piece that was sent to me by Jorge Pescara. He's a talented young man from Brazil, and he sent it along, asked me for permission to do it, and I said sure. And what I want you to do when you listen to this, understand it's his music interpretation of the process of discovery, much the same way that all of us have that experience. This is going to go for 5 minutes and 7 seconds, and then when we get back, we're going to pick it right up with the gang. Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed that piece. Let us know. I'll pass the information on to Jorge about his little compilation. I thought it was interesting. And but, you know, next time around, something like Besame Mucho, the ladies seem to like that one a lot. Same with Moonlight Serenade, and I like to keep the ladies happy. And with that, I want to bring the guys back, and right off beginning this backside of the show, I want to talk a little bit about the haboob that slammed into Phoenix. I grew up in Phoenix. I was there, you know, I lived there for 25 years. I've seen sandstorms, but man, I never saw anything like what hit Phoenix recently. And Larry, you were in the thick of it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I live at the base of what they call the Santan Mountains, which is the southern edge of the city, kind of out in the country. And I got a mountain range behind my house. And I heard my dog just barking like crazy, and I looked out my picture window, and he was like jumping straight up into the air. And I just walked outside, and it was, you know, and I've lived here for many, many years, and I've been through a lot of dust storms, no big deal. This almost had the end of the world look to it. The dust cloud itself was darker and deeper brown. It was 7,000 feet high. They're normally maybe 1,000 feet or less. This was 7,000 feet high, and it was 52 miles wide. And if you look at some of the videos, and I went on vacation to Florida the next day, and I couldn't believe it, but it was making the Florida news, and people were calling me up, Larry, you know, did you see this? And it's like, yeah, I saw it. And I remember talking to someone from Idaho when I was on the phone, and I mentioned to them, I said, I have never seen a dust storm like this. I said, I got to go, because I saw it just dwarfing the mountain from the back of my house, just coming over like a giant blanket, like with just a little pebble in the road. And then it started coming to my house. And then all of a sudden the winds just picked up extremely high. And anything that was movable in my backyard just went flying. And so I'm out there bringing in, like, stuff from the pool and cushions from the furniture and, you know, blew over my grill and all that. And I'm frantically out there trying to get all this stuff done. And in the meantime, visibility is dropping to zero. The dust is, like, extremely thick in the air. And basically at the time I was thinking, man, I've never seen one like this. And then as it turns out, I guess there's never been one like that.
No, I mean, I lived in Phoenix for 25 some odd years. Never saw. I mean, I was there. We saw snow a couple of times, you know, and it all melted off by, you know, 11 o'clock in the morning. But you know,
the odd thing about this is that, you know, and this made the news too, and it's on YouTube, so I'm not letting any cat out of a bag. But I have on top of my house, like, you know, you can go up some steps, and I got like a deck on top of my house, you know, so I can look out everywhere, and I'm up there just looking at the enormity of this thing. And as with dust storms, and before you're actually enveloped, you can actually look down the line and see it coming in. And when I was up on my roof, I'm looking down. Well, actually, I was looking out to the west, where the sun was going down, and some planes were trying to make it out ahead of that cloud. There's video of that. You can see it. They look like airplanes. It's no brainer. They weren't obscured by the cloud. If they were, I don't think they'd be allowed to take off. But I'm looking down there, and I remember seeing the last plane was a Southwest Airlines, just made it ahead of that ridge, and then no other planes took off. You could tell they had grounded the planes. And then maybe about just a few minutes later, you could see these bright glowing orbs, like at the edge of the cloud. And they would like appear there, then all of a sudden they go back into the cloud and come back out again. And, you know, and it just was really odd because it didn't look like a plane. It just looked like a bright, pulsating white ball. Wow. And you can see this on YouTube, by the way. If you go on there and say Phoenix Dust Storm UFOs, you'll see it.
Okay, that's good. You other guys got anything on the Phoenix event?
I did see the film, and is it very similar to the one that happened down in Australia?
You know, that was the first thing that came to my mind, you know, in that Australia. I mean, I have actually one of my videos and just showing this, you could barely see. There was all this red dust that was coming in. So, you know, this is another incident like what happened in Australia. It's one of the things here that it happens. The general feeling I got was once it passed, you know, out of sight, out of mind. A lot of people just didn't want to think much more about it. But, you know, I was looking at it, and it was persistent for me. And, but on the other hand, we have things that get our attention and take us down rabbit holes. With that, I'd like to talk about this Neumeier Station webcam video on YouTube. Now, for you listeners out there, if you go to the episode page for the show, you'll see where it says related links. And the first one is Neumeier Station webcam. You can watch it afterwards. But this is one where you got the Neumeier Station. And I've had a lot of people writing me about Neumeier Station. And, you know, they're watching this webcam. Now, two things I want to tell people about watching webcams. Number one is a cardinal rule of this research is the closer something comes to the truth, the faster it disappears. All right? And I never saw anything that really came and went that way with all this Neumeier video imagery. Another thing that's causing a problem is there's automatic modes, exposure modes on all these cameras that we have. Now, think about it, folks. You got a modern camera, and you go in there and it's got all these exposure modes. You got one for sports and portraits and moonlight and backlight and on the beach and so forth. And so you dial that in and the camera can expose accordingly. And all of these cameras are so computer driven, they have all of these automatic exposure modes. And so these webcams are the same way. They have software that drives it. You know, like I've got a webcam, I've got a Logitech 9000 I use for my own webcam, and it's got a feature in there. It'll follow my face if I move back and forth, and autofocus, all these other things. And so with the webcams, you got a lot of this automation software. And it's, for example, you switch from daylight to nighttime, so it goes from color to black and white mode. And then when it goes to black and white, it opens the iris completely for maximum exposure. And so people who don't understand that you have all this auto exposure technology that's driving this, see it, and then they come across with completely erroneous ideas based on an assumption that once the camera is set up, it's like a 1939 Kodak Brownie. You know, once you click the button, it's going to do what it does, and it's just going to do it the same way every time. And that's not the way modern cameras work. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do, because I know all three of you guys did a hell of a good analysis on the Neumeier video and on this one, and I think this is an important topic for the listeners out there because it's just a lot of misinformation, and it's not intentional. It's just people are not factoring in this technology. And with that, let me throw it first to Mr. Conjecture.
For you.
Gotcha. What is it, Rich?
What's your question again?
What do you think about the Neumeier Station stuff?
Well, I looked at all the video I could. I spent a lot of time on that, and it is just the moon. It does pass off the frame. And just like you were saying earlier, Marshall, the camera switches from color to black and white at night. And the sensors on that charged coupled device for the video are more sensitive. And that's the reason why the moon flares out like it does. It's so bright, it passes away off the frame. and then it causes some kind of spherical aberration on the lens, and you can actually see it on the side of the station before it looks like it's a planet in the sky. So, you know, you can actually see it on the being reflected off the side of the station, which rules it out as anything being actually in the sky. I'm more curious about why the sky is blue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some questions in there that I remember looking at this extensively with Richard Shaw, and he's producer of the Watchers series, and he really picked up immediately on all the camera issues that everyone else was missing. But I will say, in fairness, although Richard has been watching that webcam for quite some time, and because I think a lot of folks are really feeling this information is going to, if we get it and it sneaks in between the cracks, this is how we'll find it, is on a webcam coming out of Antarctica. I just don't subscribe to that theory because I've been doing this a long time, and like I said, number one rule, the closer something comes to the truth, the faster it disappears.
Marshall?
Ed? Yep.
This is Larry.
Okay, Larry, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that this gets back to what you said and some of my other panelists here early in the program, that we're only presenting, you know, what we think is credible and verifiable, objective, and we have no agenda. We have no, you know, conclusion we're trying to reach and manipulate the facts accordingly. And one of the first things I saw from that video was who uploaded it. That was forget about it, all the analysis. The first thing I saw was that Ursu Adams. Now, I don't know how much you know about this guy, but he's an ex-DJ. You know, I don't mean to be critical on the guy, but you can look at his videos on your own. He makes them like some big Broadway production called The Awakening. He goes on about how his DNA is being manipulated by reptilians, elongating his skull. He's hiding in parks from the cops that are worried about him not taking his meds. I ain't making this up. You can look at his videos. It goes into this. And so, I mean, he has zero credibility. And so if he tries to upload something and then goes on like a frame-by-frame analytical perspective, quite frankly, I don't care what he says. He's already lost all credibility with me.
Yeah, I think I can go along with that. I always bring the science in.
Yeah, yeah. And
that was July 14th, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, guys, I mean, and the flip side of this, though, is we're having a conversation that mainstream science is not going to have. They're just going to go, he's a nut, and that's it. And they speak like theologians. It's like, we have
yeah, he does.
Dead animal skins, attesting to our genius. And you must believe us. We are the gods of science. Instead of just saying, well, no, he's wrong because of this, that, and the other thing, or we're not seeing this, and then people can, you know, think for themselves. Yeah, I know. I mean, and, you know, with modern television being what it is, we're less capable that way, thank you, but still the same, you know. It goes all the way around. But, you know, another thing that I really want to do is, and we need to get back on our list here, otherwise we are going to fall way behind, is in the fourth one is what is happening on other planets. And I think this one, I'm going to start off with Ed.
Okay, well, I think we're all real interested in what's going on Saturn. There's a huge storm. Goes all the way around the planet now. It is just fantastically huge. And we're wondering what caused it, because it's only in one hemisphere, for one thing. But
it's only in one hemisphere, and it's like, and you know, excuse me, I have to interrupt for a second. Folks, don't want anybody to say this is just a coinky-dink, okay? Because we're seeing the gas giants are all doing this stuff, all right? And you'll hear about it, but please go on.
Yeah, and that, you know, and it just so happens, you know, yeah, we're having supposed objects flying past Saturn, speculated, and then we see this huge storm on Saturn. One other thing I saw just a while back, and I thought I'd bring into it also, is that it appears that, and it's working from the outer planets in, is we're seeing more and more methane in their atmospheres. And what it means, I'm not sure, but it's like a sudden cloud of methane is closing in on our sun or something, but we're seeing a lot more methane in all the atmospheres, even though they are warming, which is a contradiction. But that's just what they're observing.
I agree with that.
Has such a storm been seen? Has such a storm on Saturn been seen before?
Not that I know of.
Because just in general, guys, if you think about it, we're observing activity that consistently in a wide number of areas that seems to be of historic proportions.
I know.
Well,
I know. I know, but I can.
Go ahead, Marshall.
Well, I can tell you, if we ask David Morrison, the astrophysicist or biologist at NASA, he'll explain that it's because McDonald's is raising beef on the outer planets, and it's the methane from the cows.
Well, that explains it then. And
yeah,
here I did all that research.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we just could have got.
I should have just asked him.
That's it. It's just cow farts, right? Anyway, I digress. Back on topic.
Well, everything we're seeing on Earth, off Earth, in the solar system, in the universe, it all just happens to be first time we've ever seen this.
Yeah,
and
all these firsts.
Yeah, it's amazing how they're all coinciding.
Yeah.
I don't guess I can spin on that, huh?
What a great time to be alive.
Yeah, it is.
Well, yeah, it is. In one sense, it is. You know, are we seeing anything else with the other planets? Let me throw this one at Richard and Larry.
All right. If you don't mind, Larry, I'll go ahead and take off on this one.
Go ahead.
For right now.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to point out that the outer planets were on the other side of Elenin when it was coming through. The only one that was close to it was Saturn. And Saturn, as we know, produced that storm that was 500 times bigger than anything they've seen before. But the thing that gets me is that some of the outer planets are being affected, just like Ed said, but the monkey wrench in the reasoning there is they were on the other side of the solar system. And that brings me back to the sun again, is maybe Elenin is doing something to the sun to make it produce something, and then it's kind of like a feedback mechanism that then goes on to affect the planets. That would be the only way that the other planets could be affected so much, even though they were all the way on the other side of the solar system. So, yeah,
everything's in a delicate balance. Everything is interconnected.
Well,
I'd like to throw one more thing in, and I think it's really interesting, is Leonid Elenin, our buddy, did that simulation with an object coming through the solar system on the path Elenin did. And he did it with basically what came down to 0.0, well, what was it? 0.05 solar mass, which is 50 times the mass of Jupiter. Holy cow, I mean, if we had an object that big coming through, I mean, but we were talking, and it's all been talked about, maybe 3 to 4 Jovian masses, which is 1/12 to 1/15 of what he was talking about. And, yeah, you throw something in that's a 1/20th of the sun, darn right it's going to change the whole solar system. But something not quite that large might be able to sneak by and maybe just cause a storm on Elenin, or I mean storm on Saturn, some other effects with I just thought that was interesting that he ran a simulation, which somebody probably fed him, that was totally irrelevant.
In other words, there was a known agenda. There was a known agenda for the results.
Yeah, I mean, well, he might as well have just thrown another sun coming through the solar system and see if it would affect it. You know, well, of course it would. But bring something down below the mass, well, below 3 or 4 times the mass of Jupiter, and I seriously doubt if it will have that drastic of an effect.
Well, you know, guys, I got to say that when we were researching all of this back, especially in 2002, 2003, 2004, and we were seeing all of these anomalies in the other planets and moons in the system, anything with an atmosphere. There was a lot of reporting on it at that time. Richard Hoagland had, at one point, a rather well-researched Planet X page, and then apparently he must have made a Faustian bargain and pulled the whole thing and walked away from the topic. And that was long after 2003. But, these gas giant perturbations, atmospherically speaking, we've been seeing this stuff for years, long before any hint of Elenin. I mean, we've been sitting here talking, backtracking at I think Richard had it, or Larry had it back to 2007. Well, I mean, we were seeing changes in the planets before that. And one of the ones that really stunned us was Pluto. Pluto, after it swung around and was out on its outside leg to aphelion, its furthest point from the sun, normally it picks up a little bit of heat, but it was 10 times that of what had been observed in the past. And we were at that time also reporting that there was global warming or temperature rise, surface warming on Mars, and the poles were melting. There were huge storms on Mars, extra huge storms. But the change in the atmosphere, if we had had that dramatic a change in the atmosphere on Earth, we would not be here. It would have been an extinction level event, period. No question about it.
Well, I had heard that Pluto's atmosphere expanded about 3,000 miles.
Yeah,
kilometers.
And I mean, and it would make sense if it heated up that way, picked up all that extra heat. So, in Avebury 2008, that formation I document in my book, Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift, that crop circle, the creators of that crop circle show us that in 2012, that Pluto will be further ahead in its orbit than it should be. It'll have been pushed ahead a little bit, which would, one thing that would explain it is you have a massive object coming through that does it, gives it that extra slingshot, gives it that extra velocity. So,
Marshall, is the crop circle you're referring to, is that the one that shows the sun a little bit larger and Mercury gone?
Yeah, and actually, the thing about Avebury 2008 is when you look at the completed formation, and the easiest way to look at that formation is just go look at a cover of my book, Crossing the Cusp. I have one of the best pictures that was taken. And when this formation was formed, it's almost the size of 4 soccer fields, huge, okay? And it appeared, though, in 2 parts. The first part was a date stamp that gave us a date of the winter solstice for 2012, all right, which is December 21, 2012. And that was the date stamp part of it. The second part of that formation, when it formed some 6 or 7 days later, overlaid the first part with surgical precision. It was just amazing. And what it then showed is that early in December, that the sun is going to have a very, very, very violent episode. And at that time, we will see either Planet X or a large comet, whatever that object is going to be, but we will see it about 45 degrees off to the right. If you're assuming you're standing in that field in Avebury. It's kind of use that formation as the X marks the spot. And so what the Avebury 2008 formation is warning us is that we're going to have an awful solar event. It's just going to hammer us. And, a good way to visualize that is go get the movie Knowing with Nicolas Cage. And at the end of that movie, they show you what a worst-case show looks like. So, again, it's with the Hollywood coinky-dinks, letting the stuff out a little bit at a time. Now, that is some stuff. That's some stuff going on. Guys, we need to rock and roll here on our list because we're at about 20 minutes left in the show. Real quick on increased gamma ray output, but from where? Ed, I'm going to throw it first to you.
It looks like it's coming from Cygnus X3.
Mm-hmm.
And don't even ask me what that is. It's just far away.
Gamma ray emitter.
Yeah, it appears that's what, but it also appears that some of it is coming from our starting to get excited sun.
Yeah. So I think, we're seeing new things that are popping in, which, I think we really addressed item 6 then, is the sun producing a new kind of particle. Which takes us back to the 2012 movie scenario. What do you guys think? Richard?
Say it again, Mark, I'm sorry.
The item 6 is the sun producing a new kind of particle.
Oh,
What's your take on that?
There's been some discussion by some scientists that it is. They don't know what they see. They see another particle, but they don't know what it is. They haven't come out and given it a name that I can see. All they're saying is that there's a mysterious particle coming from the sun, and that goes back to what we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, but it takes what?
And that also goes back to what Larry was saying about the decay rates of like carbon-14. That's something that's been a rock-solid way of dating artifacts from history is carbon-14. Well, now all that stuff comes into question because now carbon-14 dating, the decay rates for that has been changing recently. So, and they don't have an answer. But there is a mysterious article out there.
If I could
Go for it.
If I could interject here, guys, because it depends how far you want to take this, and this could be a discussion in itself. I think of everything we have on the agenda tonight, this is one of the most fascinating ones that that I could talk about for hours. And I encourage you to look this up along with someone that also lives out here in Arizona, David Sereda, who talks about this, and it has so many parallels and implications. It's truly amazing beyond just the science of the discovery. They're talking about how it can actually mutate matter, for God's sake. I mean, that's incredible. David Sereda goes on to take it in terms of transforming matter. You could go biblical on this, about things changing in the twinkling of an eye in terms of our bodies. This could mutate the planet. It could mutate Earth. Again, I'm back to Mr. Conjecture here. I'll jump on that bandwagon because we don't know that much about it yet. But again, just like everything else, we're observing the effects, and we're still trying to learn more about the cause.
Yeah, and it's not just mutating matter, it's mutating all matter. And but I can add one small thing to that. I mean, the scientists were all jumping up and down. They thought they'd found this particle. They know the effects of it. I mean, I think they saw the effect first, and then they looked for the cause. But the last word I got on it was in the middle of June, they did another similar experiment at another facility, and they had no such results. They didn't see the same results. They saw no evidence. So they're still hanging out there with it, but yet they're still seeing the effect. Yeah,
they're still seeing the effect. I mean, but this is a fascinating topic. I mean, I agree with Larry. Wow, we could go on.
And the rate of decay is speeding up.
Yeah, it's kind of like tax law, isn't it?
Yeah.
But still the same. I think that the big changes that were coming in right now, and the ones that are near and dear to my house, to my heart, is what's happening with the planet, and that is takes us to the last item, which is number 7: Earth weather, seismicity, and volcanism changes. And my view of everything is that you can come to this topic and imagine you're visiting a circus. Three-ring circus comes to town. And you go to the circus, and there's the sideshow, the carnies, and, all the cotton candy and the games and the whack-a-mole and, the 22 pistols and whatever. And everyone's having fun with that. Great place to get distracted. But for me, it's about the big tent. And if you get in the big tent, to me, you have that big center ring, and then you have the two side rings. To me, the big ring in the center is our planet. That's where we have to be watching, because this is going to have the greatest impact on our individual survival. Then off to one side, you have the smaller ring, which is us, and who we are and what we're doing. And then the third ring is the future. And to my way of thinking, folks that want to get through the years ahead, the carny and the sideshow, that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of distraction. but it's not where you survive. You got to be in the big tent. You got to be seeing what's happening in that ring, those 3 rings, if you really want to make it. And with that, what I'd like to do is tell the listeners, if you, again, go on the episode page for the show on Blog Talk, and you'll see where I have a link for the PR Quake Swarm. And this is a YouTube video that is really, really impressive. Oops. Now, for those of you that want to have a good earthquake monitoring program, there's one called Quake 3D. They have 2 versions, the free and the paid. They're both excellent. I have them both. I love the paid version. It gives me a lot more information as a researcher. But for those of you out there, I don't know if you need all that much depth, but you look at it, and what you want to do is look at the last week or so and zoom in on the area that is Puerto Rico, and it's actually subsea. It's off the coast of Puerto Rico. And there are quake swarms happening out there. And when I look at this, it is really, really, really bothering for me. And so, you know, there on the related links, which are both YouTube videos, one which was the Newmeyer station, which we didn't take seriously, consider the source. But the second link, which is PR Quake Swarm, after the show, folks, I'd really suggest you take time and you look at this. And I will tell you, this impressed me so deeply that today I wrote letters, emails to my friends, even though most of them think I'm some, you know, oh, Marshall, he's into this stuff. And, you know, I don't throw it in their faces. You know, we always talk about the fluffy stuff. We always have the fun. But this is one where I said, I really want you to look at this, because if this pops, and we have another event like we just had in Japan, we're talking about a tsunami wave that Puerto Rico, Cuba, Florida, some of the southern eastern seaboard states, and the Gulf are going to see tsunamis. And it is going to slam. And so with that, I'd like to throw it open. And first off, go to Larry on this. And Larry, did you get a chance to watch the video? You've been following that.
On the quakes, Puerto Rico quake swarms?
Yeah.
Well, I just know they had 8 earthquakes in 5 hours. You know, that's one of the things I noticed. What I was doing was I was actually doing a little bit of research on things we're finding out. Maybe this existed for a long time, we didn't know, but we always thought that, you know, earthquakes were happening by the movement of the tectonic plates and, you know, pressing up against each other, and volcanoes could exist where, you know, these crevices, you know, where they're in the areas of friction and so forth. And now we're finding that, in fact, again, if for any of you that want to check this out or go on Planet X Town Hall, I've posted all the data there, as well as images of the planet that show where we have what we call mantle plumes around the world. And basically what these mantle plumes are, it kind of throws a wrench into what we think causes an earthquake. We think of tectonic plate movements, and it turns out that that's it. But that's not the only thing. And as far as that goes, that could be an effect from an outside cause, but we won't go there either. But with regard to the mantle plumes, basically the plumes of hot magma push up from the Earth's deep interior. And this has just been published July 7th in the issue of the journal Nature. You can read more about this. But it basically talks about how, think of a lava lamp, how, you know, you can get, you know, like a bubble of this magma kind of heats up and finds its way up to the surface. There's a long name for that, lithosphere or something like that. But it can't quite break through, because if it does, then the name changes and it becomes lava. But nevertheless, it bubbles up there, and sometimes it cools off and it goes back down again. Well, what we're finding is that there's more of these mantle plumes around the world than we ever imagined. And I have a world map, again, on Planet X Town Hall, where I show all the spots around the world. And Marshall, if I recall, I don't have it up in front of me right now, one of these plumes is not far from Puerto Rico. And these plumes don't necessarily have to occur along like a line between the plates. It can be right underneath the middle of one. And a good example of that, and I hate to use this because it's talked a lot in terms of extinction level events, but one of the biggest is under Yellowstone. And again, if you want to do some research, you know, I encourage you, check that out, how this it's pushed Yellowstone up 4 to 5 feet, for God's sake. and there's others around the world as well. But now we're finding that these mantle plumes may be influenced by gradient heating. So in other words, whatever is bombarding the Earth from out there could also be heating the Earth. And so if we didn't have enough trouble with gravitational shaking from, whatever, but now we can have it from just pure heating up, that we can cause these earthquakes to occur from mantle plumes.
Yeah. Ed, what about you?
Well, about the one main thing I can add to that is I remember a couple years ago reading some geology reports and such, and because we all, California is going to fall into the ocean. And it actually said the key to the California fault lines was the Puerto Rico region. And I just found that very interesting.
I live in California. It's not as interesting as you think.
Yeah, sorry about that, boss.
That's good. What's my final thought on this? How long can you tread water? Whoa. Wow. I don't know about you. I could use a little conjecture right now. Richard.
Yeah. Puerto Rico, there's been something going on down there for a very long time. It's just been shaking, daily. And recently, it seems to me like some of the earthquakes have moved offshore, further to the north. So we may be beginning to see something happen in that area. And to get back to something that Larry said about the magna plumes and maybe some kind of mystery particle is causing the magma to act up. Well, I lost my train of thought there. In the Coburn Bible, it speaks about the earth swelling like a chestnut. And we may be seeing that now because we're seeing things all over the earth taking place, not just in the atmosphere, but everything, earthquakes, volcanoes going off. We're seeing all kinds of things. We don't know what's causing it.
We don't, and I'll tell you, when I was doing the research for Crossing the Cusp, we did that 18 months of channeling with different entities. And, what we always found is that we could say, give us a severe weather prediction 6 months out, and they were always just dead on the money. It was just unnerving. On the other hand, you ask them, who's going to win the next election, they'd go pound sand. We just don't do it. That's free will. You guys control that. But one of the things that really came through time and time again through numerous different sources via different channels during that 18-month period of time was that we're not mindful, as we should be, of what is happening subsea. That the real dangers that we're facing, and think about, the quake and tsunami in Japan that took out Fukushima, subsea. We've been seeing activity where there's new subsea volcanoes forming in places that they're, scientists previously had thought that not to expect one.
Australia.
So, yeah, and look what's happening in Australia. We covered this in an article on Yowza a few years ago, where the seabed was rising dramatically, and just like right out of what was that the day after tomorrow, the one where the big global warming film that just said, the sonar buoys were starting to go offline, and the weather was changing and the currents were collapsing. Superstorms. In this case, what happens is the data was reporting, and then all of a sudden they start saying, these buoys are, they're going offline, they're broke, whatever. But it seemed like it never happened until there was some kind of interesting information. And but the rising seabed, that's a problem. From what I see, the whole ring of fire is a real ring of fire right now. And plus, we've got this new volcano that's popping off that down in South America that's going to close down air traffic pretty soon. All of these things are just coming around and coming around and coming around, and it's frustrating. You turn on the networks and it's just nonstop, unfortunately, dead white female stories so they can sell advertising. And this stuff just doesn't hit them. But, aside from that, what are we seeing, in terms of earth trends that are, and I want to round robin with you guys because we just got about 3 minutes left in the show, give you each about a minute just to, give me your hot button issues for current earth changes that are troubling for you. And I'll start this one off with Larry.
Well, probably the most obvious thing that comes to mind, I see it on the news. We're having these like record heat waves across the country. I mean, you know, I'm used to heat out here in Arizona, but we don't have humidity. But you know, it's shown like 113 in Oklahoma City, and with high humidity, and it's just scorching across the country. And prior to this, we saw a record year to date of both not just number of tornadoes, but in size of the tornadoes. And fatalities. So, and just in pure basic stuff that we live our lives. It affects us. We see it on TV. I mean, these are two very common things that are occurring at record rates right now.
Absolutely.
And again,
Absolutely.
It's an observation, but why? Why now?
Yeah. You know, and I mean, it's like, gosh, I'm tired of watching TV news anchors going, well, what's with this weather? You know, and then they blow on to the next thing. Anyway, getting it in while we have the time. Richard, what's your hot button issue? Real quick.
Well, I want to stay with Ellen just a little bit on this. We got about another 2 weeks before Ellen starts kind of to show its true colors. If it doesn't do anything, I'd say another 2 weeks to a month. Then it's just a plain old comet. Then we have to start worrying about, is there anything behind it? As far as the atmosphere with the Earth, it's just turbulent. To me, the atmosphere, from what I've seen, I've been watching weather for a long time, and the atmosphere just seems to be more turbulent than it should be. And once again, like Larry said, the heat waves, they're just unprecedented.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I look at the weather, particularly up in the northern, I mean, in areas where Minneapolis, 107, you know, I mean, that's 29 Palms, California. 107. Whoa.
And by the way, the obvious effect of this is the drought. We're having, you talk to farmers, you know, they're seeing drought like, you know, they never have before in areas that they've never had before. Farmers are selling their cattle because they can't afford to feed them. I was reading an article online about the drought in France. I mean, this is worldwide. We have extreme drought. I mean, these are almost of biblical proportions, and yet, you know, we see the effect, but we still, you know, we're just still saying, well, geez, is there some kind of cause here? Is this just an anomaly? You know, what is it?
Who knows? Real quick, Ed, you got about 20 seconds. I'm sorry, fella.
No problem. Does it all come back to the Gulf oil well incident that knocked off the Atlantic conveyor? And because it seems like we've seen the changed weather patterns after that happened with the BP oil well. Bingo.
And we've got breaking articles on Yowza. And for my listeners out there, well, at the break, I asked the fellas, we're going to be back in 2 weeks with an update on this. Sorry, folks, we've run out of time. Things are breaking news-wise so fast that, honest to God, I sit down to read my email in the morning, and it just keeps reminding me of that feeling that of being a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. You know, whoa, stuff is just happening left and right. And on top of that, I'm starting to see an awful lot of misinformation and sourcing back to Terrell, not necessarily Terrell himself, but it is sourcing back to those around him. That's creating a lot of confusion and distortion out there. We're going to talk about that tonight. And first off, just want to bring Bill on just for a second and say, hey, Bill, thanks for standing up tonight. Just for the audience to let you know, Bill has a real bad toothache. And he decided to be a real champ and stand up and work the show tonight. And he'll go to the doctor for the necessaries. And, Bill, thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, man. And just afterwards, take 2 or 3 of the good stuff.
And then out there, 3 or 4. You never know what I might take.
Yeah, you know. I mean, well, after this conversation tonight, it'll be to the extreme. Then on the virtual chat room, we have Susan from down in Mexico. And Susan, you're a sweetheart. You're always out there working and getting that chat room organized. And for those of you who are in the chat room, if you want to have your questions presented to our guest tonight, make sure Susan knows about it. And My rules with the chat room are simple. Hang your guns at the door, cowboy, and be nice to Miss Kitty, and you'll have a good time. And if not, you will leave the premises feet first. Now, with that, let me bring in our guest for the night. First off, we have our newest member of the LNN team, Larry Prescott. Hey, Larry.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. You know, last time you came in, you were a caller, and Ed and Richard just liked you so much, and you had so many good ideas. They said, hey, this guy can walk and chew gum at the same time. Bring him in. And you did.
Unbelievable.
Thank you.
I've been working at it. The gum falls out sometimes, but I'm getting it down.
All right. Yeah, well, none of us are perfect. Is that, by the way, sugar-free? And then I've just brought on Richard, Ned, Ed, and Rich. Hey, guys.
Hello, hello.
Go ahead, Ed.
All right.
Go ahead, Ed.
All right. And before we get into the show tonight, fellas, does anybody have real fast a hot button issue that they want to discuss?
Not me.
The only thing that I would like
to cover it all.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Rich.
I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I don't have anything as far as the hot topic right now. I think we're going to cover a lot tonight, and whatever hot topic I might, there's too many of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just like I said, it's like being a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, you know. You got to be quick on your feet. Ed, anything for you?
I just wanted to mention to everybody that unlike some sources, we just put the information out here, and it's up to the people to take it and run with it. We don't come right out and make anything that isn't verified and proven to be true, no statements. So if we say something that's credible, and but just take it for what it is. It's information. We're sort of like throwing the news out, and you decipher it.
Well, there is some conjecture in there. I got to say that, at least on my part. Conjecture is part of discovering a problem.
Well, you know, we all are having a great conversation. I've really been enjoying the preparation leading up to the show, and good Lord, we've done a bunch of it. And I, you know, I just hope we can get through all the things tonight. But I want to say one thing to the audience and everyone up front. And, you know, what I would love to be able to do for 2 hours is just to talk about preparation and planning. But I don't do that. At least I'm not on this show. And the reason why is, over the years, what I have found is that if people can get good, objective information that's honest, then they'll sort things out for themselves. And once they take responsibility for that knowledge, they decide to take action on it, they're just like little Energizer bunnies. Bang, 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 right down the road. You don't have to wind them up, whatever. Just get them enough information, it flips the switch, and they're off and down the road. And they'll do the preparation and planning that's necessary. And so I guess what I'm saying to you listeners out there is that we've got a reverse logic thing going here. If we can give you the basic information you need and get it to you as honestly and as fairly as we can so that you can make a decision about it, once you take responsibility for that, you'll know what to do next. And with that, let's get into the first topic we have. Item number 1 on the list is the latest about LNN, and of course my email box has been absolutely stuffed with folks talking about the JPL simulator has changed the graphic for the trajectory of Planet X. So I'll tell you what, I'll throw that at Richard first.
Yes. In the past, when we looked at the orbital simulator page, that had the sharp angles to designate the direction that Helen was going. I think that was just showing their uncertainty. And now that they've locked in on where they think it's going to go, they've just gone ahead and rounded out the graph. As far as the orbital parameters themselves, they have not changed. We'll still have, you know, the alignments coming up when they're supposed to. Closest distance to the sun is going to be the same date. So nothing's changed except the graphic.
Okay. Well, and also we've been talking a lot in our email preparations for the show about the velocity of Elenin, and let me throw that one at Ed to start that off.
Oh, that's interesting, because we have several different ways that we figure it, and the good part is we disagree, and
no.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we would actually disagree, but there's no set method for what we use to figure it out. I know Richard likes to use the closing velocity of Elenin as it's closing on Earth and then adding the Earth velocity into it. Myself, I like to use the closing velocity of Elenin and the Sun and then fudge it a little bit because it's slightly off angle. And however many other methods we have, and sometimes we actually come up with the same numbers, which is tricky, but we do.
Okay. Well, Ed, I'm going to round robin on this, but first off, let me ask Ed, since we are not in unanimous agreement here, what are the numbers you have?
Well, right now, they've been showing about a 0.018 AU gap closing speed every day for the Sun. And that's off a little bit of an angle, so I fudge it in. I might put in another 0.001 or something like that. Anyway, I come out around 67 to 70,000 miles per hour.
Okay. All right. And let's go next. Larry, have you got a number?
I was looking at some data that it looked a little bit faster. It looked about maybe 80. That, you know, I think we're all about in the same ballpark here.
Okay. Richard, what about you?
Well, I went back a long way. I went back to 2007 and earlier. Actually, I went back further than that and went in 6-year gaps and figured out how fast it was going back then. It started out something like 23,000. Closer it gets, faster it's going. Now, I finally ended up for today somewhere around 60,000 miles per hour, and it should pick up some more speed.
Okay. Well, you know, I know that we have satellite observations on it, and I think we pretty much, unless anyone else has anything to add, with the exception of velocity on Elenin in terms of a current update. Ed, you got anything else?
I have so many notes. Like you say, we've been digging into this so much. The one thing I might bring up is some calculations of what happens when the Earth gets to it after it crosses our orbit. And some latest calculations, there's going to be a lot of different numbers here, but I'll put it this way. 1 degree from the ecliptic at the distance of Earth's orbit works out to about, which page do I have that one on? About 1.6 million miles. So if it's 1 degree above the ecliptic at that time, it'll be over 1.5 million miles away. If it's 2 degrees, we're talking over 3 million miles, which means if there's a real good possibility, I don't care how big the tail is, they're saying the coma is 80,000 miles wide, whatever. That's not going to even come close to touching us. We might get lucky.
Okay. Okay. So as we get closer to this, I guess what? Is it starting to look more like it's just going to be another comet and nothing real special about it?
Well, we better hope so. It does look like it's going to be above us when we finally get to where it has crossed our path.
Okay. And, you know, do we have, Richard, are you seeing a possibility we fly through the tail?
Well, if we go by the information that we have from scientific web pages like JPL, it does look like it'll be above the ecliptic, a little bit too much for that to happen. But the thing about Elenin is it's a new comet, and new comets coming from the Oort cloud are known. They're kind of notorious for breaking up. Now, of course, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's possible, you know, if Elenin broke up and they dispersed somewhat, then, you know, who knows? We might fly through something like that. I do want to mention this about the speed, is that between now and the time that it comes closest to the Sun, it's about a month, almost a month and a half's time, it's almost going to cover 1 AU. I'd say 0.8 AU in 1 month's time.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's moving pretty quick as time goes on. It's picking up speed as we talk, you know. And as far as flying through the tail, we just have to wait and see. And as far as pictures of Ellen, we don't have any recent pictures. The reason being that it's getting a little bit too close to the sun, and a telescope, when it tries to see it at night, it's getting light pollution in pictures, and they're just not able to take a good picture. Our next best shot is Stereo B, which we'll cover later.
And as I understand, they're also going to try and cover it with SOHO when they're doing the maneuvering exercises now.
Correct.
You know, so there'll be two birds looking at it. But the big question, and it really goes to the title of the show tonight, is are we going to see that? Are they going to share that? Or is it going to be another situation, as we have seen in the past and documented on Yowza.com, where NASA takes a few weeks to decide to release images, and when they do release it, I mean, you know, it's just a handful of things. So you can tell that this has been pretty well groomed through, and everybody was just making, you know, as much effort as possible to see to it that it came beyond the news cycle with as little as possible. So here we have Stereo B, and for those of you out there, listeners, Stereo A and Stereo B are a pair of solar space-based observatories. And this, again, was something we noted back on Yowza, I think it was 2008. For the longest time, there was just SOHO, and that was it. Now, in the last few years, there has been a veritable fleet, I think 7 or 8, maybe more, solar observatories, and those are the ones that they're talking about. I would venture to say there's some black op launches too that they're doing, but you know, no doubt about that. I mean, especially with the solar maximum coming on and the concerns of that, if you know we catch a dead-on X or Y class flare, and that thing's got a southern orientation on it, and the grids have not been shut down in advance of that, and we're going to have a pretty nasty time. We're going to lose our power, and electronics are going to get hammered. It'll be pretty rough. So I hope that they're going to track all that stuff. But, you know, when I look at this in terms of the comet itself, and you know, right now I am just seeing an awful lot of stuff coming on, and it's sourcing back to Terrell. And I really, gosh, I just hate taking people dead on and finding fault with what's going on. But what I am seeing right now is a lot of misinformation. And I can see where there are folks that are, well, they're just invested in their outcome.